The first time she strutted into my vineyard, I thought it was a joke. There was HOA Karen, larger than life, waddling between the grape rows in her oversized sun hat and loud floral dress, barking orders like she was surveying her kingdom. In her pudgy hands, she clutched a pair of kitchen scissors and a basket lined with a frilly towel. Without so much as a glance in my direction, she reached for a bunch of plump, sun-warmed grapes, snipped them clean off, and tossed them into her basket like they were hers by right. I was frozen for a moment, torn between disbelief and fury. This wasn't a market stall. This was my vineyard, my livelihood, my family's legacy. And here she was stealing from it in broad daylight. "Excuse me," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you think you're doing?" She turned with that smug expression I had come to dread, the one that said she had already decided she was right and nothing I could say would matter. "These grapes are HOA property," she declared, puffing up her chest. "You're violating community beautification codes by hoarding them. As president of the board, I'm entitled to redistribute resources." My jaw nearly hit the soil. She wasn't even hiding it. She was stealing grapes and dressing it up as redistribution. I told her flatly, "This vineyard is mine. This private property, not HOA land. You don't get to touch a single grape without my permission." But she just laughed a shrill, condescending sound that cut through the quiet afternoon. "You really think these rows belong to you? Don't play dumb. This land has always been part of our HOA's territory. Everyone knows it. You can't keep all this to yourself." Then, as if to prove her point, she snipped another cluster and stuffed it into her basket, looking me dead in the eye. That was the moment my blood boiled. I had endured her letters taped to my door, the fake fines slipped into my mailbox, the thinly veiled threats about my fencing not conforming to HOA standards. But this was different. This was theft, arrogance, and humiliation all rolled into one. And worse yet, a couple of my neighbors were walking by at that very moment, stopping to stare as if wondering who was right. Karen thrived on that. She wanted an audience, wanted them to see me flinch while she played queen. But not today. I said nothing more. Instead, I pulled out my phone and began recording. Karen, too wrapped up in her own performance, didn't even blink. She went on ranting about bylaws and shared harvest, all while plucking grapes like some tyrannical gardener. When I finally spoke, my words were cold and deliberate. "You want to claim this land as HOA territory? Let's talk deeds. Let's talk ownership. Let's talk about who really controls these rows." She scoffed, waving me off, but I could see a flicker of uncertainty cross her eyes. What she didn't know and what I was about to reveal was that I wasn't just the owner of this vineyard. I owned the entire surrounding agricultural region. My family had purchased the parcels over decades, consolidating them until nearly every vine, every field, and every warehouse within miles bore our name on the deeds. I wasn't some hobby farmer playing with grapes. I was the landholder who supplied nearly half the county's wineries. And in 10 minutes, Karen was about to learn that her little kingdom didn't just stop at my fence, it was built entirely inside mine. The twist came sooner than even I expected. As Karen continued her charade, a black SUV rolled up the dirt road. Out stepped Councilman Reyes, a county official I had been working with on regional conservation plans. He greeted me warmly and then turned his gaze to Karen, who froze mid-snip, scissors dangling like a smoking gun. "What exactly are you doing, ma'am?" he asked sharply. She stammered about HOA authority and beautification rules, but the councilman cut her off. "This land is designated agricultural preserve under the county plan. It belongs to Mr. Alvarez and his family trust. The HOA has zero jurisdiction here." You could see the color drain from her cheeks as the neighbors whispered behind their hands. Her performance was collapsing in real time, the narrative ripped out from under her feet. And when I pulled a folded map from my pocket, stamped and notarized, showing the boundaries of my holdings stretching across the valley, the truth hit her like a thunderclap. Not only was she trespassing, she was challenging a man who legally owned the very ground she stood on. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "You fined me for my fences, you threatened me over my harvest, and now you steal from my vines. But here's the truth, Karen. I don't just own this vineyard. I own the region. Every grape you touch is mine by law. You want to test that in court? Be my guest." The crowd gasped, The councilman nodded gravely, and for the first time in her life, Karen's bluster cracked. Her hands trembled, and the basket of stolen grapes tumbled from her grip, rolling across the dirt like discarded lies. Karen's collapse didn't happen in an instant, but the first cracks showed that day when the basket slipped from her hands and the grapes spilled onto the dirt. She bent down to gather them, but the councilman's voice cut through her frantic muttering. "Leave it," he ordered. It was sharp, official, the tone of a man tired of watching petty tyrants abuse power. Karen straightened slowly, her face blotchy red, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Neighbors whispered louder now, emboldened by the sight of her shrinking frame. For years she had stood over them, threatening fines, barking rules, claiming authority. But now, stripped of her lies in the face of deeds and officials, she looked suddenly small, almost pitiful. I turned to the gathered crowd, raising my voice so they could all hear. This vineyard is not, and never has been, HOA property. My family holds the title not just to this land, but to the entire agricultural region you see around you. Karen's claims are false. Her fines are fabricated. And tonight, you've all witnessed her stealing with your own eyes. Gasps rippled across the group. A mother clutched her daughter's hand tighter. An older man shook his head with a low whistle. Karen stammered, "This is a misunderstanding." I was only, but her excuses were drowned by the councilman's next words. "This isn't just a misunderstanding, ma'am. This is theft, fraud, and harassment. And it ends today." Karen tried one last gambit. She puffed her chest and declared, "I'll have my lawyers handle this. You'll all regret humiliating me. The HOA has more power than you think." But when the councilman produced his phone and dialed the county sheriff on speaker in front of everyone, the facade shattered. "Sheriff? We've got an incident of trespass and theft in progress at the Alvarez Vineyard. The suspect is the president of the HOA. Yes, she's still here." The crowd's murmurs turned to open disbelief. Karen's eyes darted wildly as though searching for an escape, but there was none. 10 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser rolled up, lights flashing. The deputy stepped out, hand resting on his holster, and asked for the details. When I showed him the map of my holdings and pointed out Karen's basket of stolen grapes, he didn't need much convincing. Karen wailed as he guided her toward the car, her protests echoing against the vineyard walls. "You can't do this to me. I'm the president. I run this community." But the deputy only said, "Not anymore, ma'am." The image of her being lowered into the cruiser, red-faced and sputtering, seared itself into everyone's memory. But that was only the beginning. The county launched a full audit of the HOA. What they found shocked even me. Karen had been inventing fines for years, pocketing thousands from frightened homeowners too weary to fight. She had redrawn boundary lines on HOA pamphlets to include land that never belonged to the association. She had even attempted to negotiate with developers, promising them excess property if they contributed to her personal beautification fund. It was a web of greed spun so thick it nearly strangled the neighborhood. And now every strand was unraveling. The trial drew crowds like a festival. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, cameras ready to capture the downfall of the so-called Vineyard Queen. Inside, Karen sat at the defense table, her once smug face sagging with exhaustion, her hands cuffed in front of her. The prosecutor laid out the evidence with devastating clarity. The fake fines, the falsified maps, the stolen money trail leading straight into Karen's bank account. Witness after witness took the stand. Neighbors who had been too scared to speak until now. Their voices trembled at first, but soon grew strong as they recounted the threats, the humiliation, the fear. By the time Mr. Lee told the story of being fined for planting a cherry tree, the jury was glaring at Karen like she was poison. The twist no one saw coming came on the third day of trial. A developer, brought in under subpoena, admitted that Karen had promised him direct access to my land if he helped her muscle me out. She had even sent him forged HOA approval letters with my name typed at the bottom as if I had signed them. When the forged letters were held up in court, I felt the anger burn anew in my chest. To impersonate me, to put my name on lies meant to erase my family's legacy, there was no coming back from that. The jury members shook their heads, lips pursed. The judge looked ready to erupt. Karen's defense attorney tried to argue she was misguided, that her intentions were to build community. But the mountain of evidence crushed those excuses like grapes underfoot. When closing arguments came, the prosecutor's words rang like a bell. This isn't about community. This is about control. This is about a woman who believed her greed outweighed the rights of her neighbors. And now it's about accountability. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, theft, forgery, harassment, falsifying legal documents. When the judge read out the sentences, even years in state prison, restitution to every homeowner she defrauded, and a permanent ban from any future association leadership, Karen finally broke. She sobbed openly, pleading for mercy, but the gavel's slam silenced her cries. The neighbors erupted into applause, not out of cruelty, but out of relief. It was over. Afterward, something beautiful happened. Freed from Karen's chokehold, the community came alive in ways I hadn't seen before. Gardens once ripped out by violations bloomed again. Children played in yards without fear of noise complaints. Neighbors gathered for barbecues, sharing laughter where once there had been suspicion. And as for me, the man she tried to humiliate over a basket of grapes, I was no longer seen as a solitary farmer on the edge of town. I was seen as a guardian of legacy, the man who had stood firm when it mattered most. Councilman Reyes approached me one evening as the sun set behind the vines. He laid a hand on my shoulder and said, "You didn't just defend your land. You defended your community's dignity. People will remember that." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words deep in my bones. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind, the one that always said, "Land is more than soil. It's memory. It's honor. Protect it." And now others would too. Sometimes, I still walk the rows at dusk, the grapes heavy with promise. And I think of that day Karen stood here, scissors in hand, believing she could take what wasn't hers. She thought she was untouchable. She thought a title gave her the right to trample on others. But the truth stood taller than her arrogance, and justice brought her down to her knees. So I ask you, if someone like Karen tried to claim your harvest, your history, your home, would you have fought back as I did? Or would you have let her take it for the sake of peace? Was I right or wrong to push until the whole truth came out? Share your thoughts, because sometimes standing your ground is the only way a community learns to grow.